Hello, 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 and welcome to Fireside Fairytales. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory, and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel, a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. And if you've never been here before, well, thank you very much for checking it out. You should know that if you're watching this live, there is a little live chat currently growing a crop of potatoes that includes Uncle Kitty, Tammy Morelli, GS. I think I saw Genera in there, and I'm sure a few others will come along. Good to see you folks. I'm glad to hear so many people are feeling better after a few weeks under the weather for many of you. But if you're not watching this live, you can skip all this chitter chatter if you want by clicking on the description in the timestamp in the description below. Before you do that, though, let me sorry, I'm just trying to get this level to be good. Let me say something really quick, which is this is a two-part video. The second part will be next week. If you're just looking for a story about a creature with a phylactery, if that's what drew you in, the second one next week, or next in the playlist if you're watching this many months or years later, is the one that will cover that. I'll discuss sort of the structure of that in a moment. But just so you know, in case you click ahead to the story and you're like, why is there nothing obviously lich-like in this story? There's a reason, but if you don't want to hear the description, just next week is the story that you want. Hello, Jump Store, good to see you. Okay, I have an abnormal amount of things to say today, so I'm going to try to get to them. That's why I tried to start at a punctual time. So, first and foremost, of little interest to anybody, but worth mentioning, tomorrow is our 5th anniversary of this channel, which means that I've been doing it for 5 years, if you know how words work, which is a surprise to me, to be honest. It's probably less of a surprise to most of you, since a lot of you haven't been watching for the full 5 years, but it's hard to believe it's half a decade. The second thing I'm going to say is I did, as people, regular viewers of the channel know, start this on my birthday, so that also means it's my birthday tomorrow. So I'm old enough that it doesn't really matter, but it's worth mentioning. I'm sorry to hear you're having trouble, Jumpster. And that's about all I'll say on that, because I need to talk to you about Koshchei the Deathless. Okay. A few weeks past, we read a story called Of the Giant Who Hadn't a Heart on Him from Asbjornsen and Moe's collection of Norwegian folklore. In that, there was a particular conceit, and I'm going to quote it again here. This is from that story. If you missed it, it's something about giants are bad at proposals or something. It's from a couple of slots up the Fireside Fairytale playlist, which there is one. Thank you very much for all the kind words from folks in the chat about birthday and anniversary. But anyways, I quote it again here. Far, far away on a lake lies an island, he said, he here being the giant, or a troll roughly. On that island stands a church, and in that church there is a well, and in that well swims a duck, and in that duck there is an egg, and in that egg is my heart. And the conceit of that story, if you remember it, is that you can't kill this giant until you find its heart. And then it's very hard to figure out where his heart is. Now, when I read that story, in fact, I sort of giggled about it at the time. I joked about a duck phylactery. I do want to mention, too, there isn't really a good place for me to drop this information, so I'll just drop it here. In the book we're going to read here about Koshchei, which is Russian Fairy Tales collection of Muscovite folklore from Ralston, which we've read from before. He mentions that story. By the way, the Norwegian tale is noted in the commentary of the book as one version of this. Anyways, at the time I joked that the giant had a duck phylactery, or a duck egg phylactery, I suppose. Now that's a joke that probably meant nothing to about half or more of my audience. I don't really know what the exact hobby range of my audience is, but I'm not sure that phylactery meant anything to you. So let me explain. In Dungeons and Dragons, the tabletop RPG game, humanoid mages can artificially extend their lives to nearly immortal levels by creating a thing called a phylactery. Now, I'm going to skip the lore because there's a lot of lore and it conflicts, and there's a bunch of... I'm not getting into it here. Suffice to say, though, that D&D isn't really like Lord of the Rings, where there's like a really defined canon that's all spelled out. It's much more folkloric, which is one of the reasons I like it. So there's lots of different versions of this over many editions, but I'm going to kind of skip over most of that detail. So I'm going to skip the lore, and I'll just say that a phylactery in this sense is an expensive container that's enchanted to hold their soul, the caster's soul. And what that means is that their undead, rotting body can be destroyed, but as long as their phylactery is still around, it will reform. So you have to, you can kill it, and then you got to figure out where their phylactery is. So you can see the comparison. Also, though not specifically relevant to any story we're going to read, just in case you're curious, they extend their life by feeding souls into that phylactery, so they siphon off other people's life energy. Anyways, why am I bringing this up? By cosmic coincidence, as these things often go, a week after reading that story, I got into a conversation about the real-world origins of a lich in D&D. I'm a bit of a dummy sometimes at recalling stuff, so my first reaction was like, I don't know if there is one, and then I remembered this story. But in that conversation, somebody brought up Koshchei the Deathless. And it was a legend that I had not encountered before, even though it was in this book, because I don't read these books like cover to cover. I sort of look through, find a thread and follow it and see what other stories I can find around it. Anyways, it was then that I put together that the Asbjornsen story was nearly identical. It is also then that I realized it was very likely an inspiration for the lich. Now, Koshchei is a villain who has hidden his death away in some obscure object, usually a small mammal, like a rabbit or a duck or something like that. Now, I will clarify, I don't know for certain that Koshchei was the inspiration for liches. It could just be common thoughts from a common species. But I will say that much of D&D's worlds were written by folks that grew up reading not just folklore, but literally the books we read here. So it's not hard to imagine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read a story about Koshchei the Deathless this week, though this one does not engage with the phylactery aspect, but I do want to sort of develop him a bit as a character first, because he is a villain. And then next week I will read another tale about Koshchei that does deal with his phylactery element. I would have actually read both of them this week, but they are quite long, and I knew that this would take forever if I did it in one stream, so that's why it's split over two. As a few final notes here, I should clarify that what is actually in the duck's egg, or rabbit, or whatever, does vary a lot. We're going to read some certain versions of it, and we have read versions of it in Asbjornsen and Mo, but I always feel the need to remind people that these are not, like, definitive. In the commentary for Russian fairy tales that we're going to read, Ralston, the collector for it, speaks about how sometimes the egg has like a particular stone or weapon that can be found that will kill Koshchei. Ralston also postulates that the roots of these stories, and this was interesting to me, I haven't had a chance to search for it, go all the way back to at least Egypt in 1300 BC. He mentions a papyrus that was found. And apparently in that tale, according to Ralston, a man puts his heart in the flower of an acacia tree, which will kill him if that flower falls, but otherwise evidently makes him deathless. So, as always with folklore, the reason I'm bringing this up now, you know, the temptation when I read a story that has elements we would see in a lich is that I can feel that the conversations become like the original lich and stuff like that, and I need to head that off at the pass. There are no origins we can meaningfully determine on any broad cultural scale, and attempts to do so are a waste of time when it comes to narrative, I should say. There is no canon. I should put that on a shirt, honestly. I say that so often. There is no canon in folklore, not as we understand it. These are just earlier examples of similar cycles of storytelling. And I, on a personal level, attempts to collate this history of narrative into categories, which is a common activity in a lot of circles, especially categories with definitive origins, is, in my opinion, done by arbitrary exclusion of a bunch of details that confront that thesis. And usually, maybe not always, but usually it feels like it's towards, let's say, questionable ends. So all of that is to say, when I say that I'm going to tell you some stories that might be sort of the origins of the lich, please take that in the context of a potential point of inspiration for those that created the lich might be some of these stories. I'm sure there are others. I'm sure I'll get in the comments about, I always thought it was blank blank, and it'll be something that makes perfect sense too, because that's how storytelling elements develop, usually from multiple sources, and sometimes not always so obviously connected. So that's what I wanted to say about that. So the TLDR of that is we are going to read about a deathless villain. The first story we read won't have this phylactery element, but we will sort of develop him as a character through it. And then next week, we're going to read a version of it where he does have a phylactery. Okay, I have some questions in the chat. Off topic, but Rory, who is your favorite monster or character over the past 5 years? I know the Big Hunt. I think you mean the Wild Hunt there, unless I'm forgetting something. But any others? I don't find that folklore has like as much of a pantheon of monsters as I expected. I'll say that much. Like the impression that I was given from coming from, you know, Disney films and what are my other touch points for folklore? Lord of the Rings, and D&D, was that there would be more of a bestiary than there really is. That very often monsters are not particularly described, and if they are, they tend to be kind of one of like 4 formulations. So I often think of it, which I guess makes sense because it wasn't a super visual culture, right? To be in oral storytelling. You know, the one that comes to mind for me, though, is, I forget what it's called, but it's a very short little snippet we read around Halloween, maybe last year, maybe the year before. Maybe it was the year before. There's a German tale about this really, like, tall creature that hid in an alley and would, like, chase you out. That one really stood out for me. I also particularly like, although for whatever reason, it just never picked up in the algorithm or anything like that, I really like the rendition of the Fae that, which is more of a collective monster, but that, the boy who went with the fairies from, the one who, the fellow, Sheridan Le Fun, who's the boy who went with fairies. I like his rendition. It's not really folklore, I suppose, because it is sort of single author. Folklore inspired. Gia says, you just sound like someone who can't pronounce factory? What was that in reference to? Flower seems fragile. Oh, phylactery. Oh, I get it. Yes. All right. Sorry for so much more talking, but I felt like I needed to give a little bit of context, because I'm sure some of you looked at that and went, what the heck is a lich? Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Deathless villain, a very specific one from Russian folklore. To my knowledge, exclusively Russian. Not the cycle, but this character. Okay. Our first tale of the night, and our only tale of the night, comes to us from Russian Fairy Tales, a choice collection of Muscovite folklore, and it is a tale called Marya Morevna. And it is a tale concerning Koshchei the Deathless. In a certain kingdom, there lived a Prince Ivan. He had 3 sisters. The first was the Princess Marya. The second was Princess Olga. And the third, the Princess Anna. And when their father and mother lay at the point of death, they had thus enjoined their son. Give your sisters in marriage to the very first suitors who come to woo them. Don't go keeping them by you. And then they died. And so the prince buried them, and then, to solace his grief, he went with his sisters into the garden green to stroll. Then suddenly the sky was covered by a black cloud, and a terrible storm arose. "Let us go home, sisters," he cried, and hardly had they got into the palace when the thunder pealed, and the ceiling split open, and into the room where they were came flying a falcon bright, and the falcon smote upon the ground and became a brave youth and said, "Hail, Prince Ivan! Before I came as a guest, but now I have come as a wooer. I wish to propose for your sister, the Princess Marya." "If you find favor in the eyes of my sister, I will not interfere with her wishes. Let her marry you in God's name." And so the Princess Marya gave her consent, and the falcon married her and bore her away into his own realm. Days following days, hours chase hours, a whole year goes by. One day, Prince Ivan and his 2 sisters were out to stroll in the garden green. And again there arose a storm cloud with a whirlwind and lightning. "Let us go home, sisters," cried the prince. Scarcely had they entered the palace when the thunder crashed and the roof burst into a blaze and the ceiling split in twain. And in flew an eagle. The eagle smote upon the ground and became a brave youth. "Hail, Prince Ivan! Before I came as a guest, but now I've come as a wooer." And he asked for the hand of Princess Olga. And Prince Ivan responded, "If you find favor in the eyes of the Princess Olga, marry you. I will not interfere with her liberty of choice." The Princess Olga gave her consent and married the eagle, and the eagle took her and carried her off to his own kingdom. Another year went by. Prince Ivan said to his youngest sister, "Let us go out, stroll in the garden green." And they strolled for a time, and again there arose such a storm cloud and a whirlwind and lightning. And they returned home, but they hadn't had time to sit down before the thunder crashed. Ceiling split open, and in flew a raven, and smote upon the floor to become a brave youth. The former youth had been handsome, but this one was handsomer still. "Well, Prince Ivan, before I came as a guest, but now I've come as a wooer. Give me the Princess Anna to wed." "I won't interfere with my sister's freedom. If you gain her affections, let her marry you." And so the Princess Anna married the raven, and he bore her away to his own realm. And Prince Ivan was left alone. A whole year he lived without his sister. And then he grew weary and said, "I will set out in search of my sisters." Pardon me. I'm just going to get a drink of water. Well, he got ready for the journey. He rode, and one day he saw a whole army lying dead on the plain. He cried aloud, "If there be a living man there, let him make answer. Who has slain this mighty host?" And there replied unto him a living man, "Oh, this mighty host has been slain by the fair Princess Marya Morevna." Well, Prince Ivan rode further on. He came to a white tent, and forth came to meet him the Princess Marya Morevna. "Hail, Prince," says she. "Whither does God send you? Or is it of your free will, or against your will?" Prince Ivan replied, "Not against their will do brave youths ride." "Well, if your business be not pressing, tarry a while in my tent." That. I don't know what that's meant to say. I think there's a problem with the file here. Thareet was Prince Ivan glad. He spent 2 nights in the tent, and he found favor in the eyes of Marya Morevna. And she married him. The fair Princess Marya Morevna carried him off into her own realm. They spent some time together, and then the princess took it into her head to go a-warring. So she handed over all the housekeeping affairs to Prince Ivan. Janera says, "Do what in her tent?" You know what they mean. You guys are not uncovering scandal. It is 100% implied. So she handed over all the housekeeping affairs to Prince Ivan and gave him these instructions. "Go about everywhere. Keep watch over everything. Only do not venture to look into that closet there." Well, we know how these stories go. He couldn't help himself. He did it. And the moment Marya Morevna had gone, he rushed to the closet, pulled open the door, and looked in. He didn't even, usually the wife lasts a couple of weeks or so before she does this. He lasted 2 minutes. There hung Koshchei the Deathless, fettered by 12 chains. Then Koshchei entreated Prince Ivan, saying,
Have pity on me, and give me to drink. 10 years have I been here in torment, neither eating or drinking. My throat is utterly dried up.
Well, the prince felt sympathy. He got him a bucket full of water. And Koshchei, he drank it up. And when it was done, he asked for more, saying,
A single bucket of water will not quench my thirst. Give me more.
Well, the prince gave him a second bucketful, and Koshchei drank it up. And wouldn't you know it, he asked for a third. And when he had swallowed that third bucketful, the old beast regained his former strength, and he gave his chains a shake, and he broke all 12 at once.
Thank you, Prince Ivan,
cried Koshchei the Deathless.
Now you will sooner see your own ears than Marya Morevna.
And out the window he flew in the shape of a terrible whirlwind. Now, we don't really get any indication that he's got like a mage in many explicit ways, but that's one of them, that he has some sort of magic nature. And so he came upon the fair Princess Marya Morevna as she was going her way, and he laid hold of her, and he carried her off home with him. But Prince Ivan wept full sore. He arrayed himself and set out a-wandering, saying to himself, "Whatever happens, I will go and look for Marya Morevna." Well, one day passed. Another day passed. And at the dawn of the third day, he saw a wondrous palace. And by the side of the palace stood an oak, and on the oak sat a falcon bright. And down flew the falcon from the oak, smote upon the ground, and turned into a brave youth, then cried aloud, "Ha! Dear brother-in-law, how deals the Lord with you?" Out came running the Princess Marya, joyfully greeted her brother Ivan, and began inquiring after his health, and telling him all about herself. Well, the prince spent 3 days with them, and then he said, "I cannot abide with you. I must go in search of my wife, the fair Princess Marya Morevna." "Hard will it be for you to find her," answered the falcon. "At all events, leave with us your silver spoon. We will look at it and remember you." So Prince Ivan left his silver spoon at the falcon's and went on his way again. One thing that always really, just as a distraction here, one thing that is always really interesting to me about this old folklore is just the lack of communication. So when like you would see someone and then they would leave on their like 6-week journey to go home, you just sort of concluded that you might never ever see that person again. Didn't matter who they were. And that's so wild to me. Anyways, he leaves behind the silver spoon so they may remember him. On he went one day, and on he went another day, and by the dawn of the third he saw a palace still grander than the former one, and hard by the palace stood an oak, and on the oak sat an eagle. Down flew the eagle from the oak, smote upon the ground, and turned into a brave youth, and cried aloud, "Rise up, Prince Olga! Hither comes our brother dear." And Princess Olga immediately ran to meet him, and began kissing him and embracing him and asking after his health, and telling him all about herself. And with them Prince Ivan stopped 3 days. And then he said, "I cannot stay here any longer. I'm going to look for my wife, the fair Princess Marya Morevna." "Hard will it be for you to find her," replied the eagle. "Leave with us a silver fork. We will look at it and remember you." And so he left a silver fork behind, and he went his way. He traveled 1 day, then 2, and at daybreak on the 3rd, he saw a palace grander than the first 2, and near the palace stood an oak, and on that oak sat a raven. And down flew the raven from the oak, and smote upon the ground, and turned into a brave youth, and cried aloud, "Princess Anna, come forth quickly, our brother is coming." And out ran the Princess Anna, and greeted him joyfully, and began kissing him and embracing him, and asking after his health, and telling him all about herself, while Prince Ivan stayed with them for 3 days. And then he said, "Farewell, I'm going to look for my wife, the fair Princess Marya Morevna." "Hard will it be for you to find her," replied the raven. "Anyhow, leave your silver snuff box with us. We will look at it and remember you." And the prince handed over his silver snuff box, took his leave, and went his way. 1 day he went, another day he went, and on the 3rd he came to where Marya Morevna was. She caught sight of her love, flung her arms around his neck, burst into tears, and exclaimed, "Oh, Prince Ivan, why did you go disobey me, and go looking into the closet, and letting out Koshchei the Deathless? Forgive me, Marya Morevna." You think if she's your wife, you could just use one name, but I guess not. "Remember not the past." I mean, that's a very fitting thing for him to say in this moment. Sorry. Just let's not get hung up on who did what, who ignored what warning, and released a monster. Much better fly with me while Koshchei the Deathless is out of sight. Perhaps you won't catch us. So they got ready and fled. And now Koshchei was out hunting. Towards evening he was returning home, and when his good deeds stumbled beneath him. "Why stumblest thou, sorry jade? Scentest thou some ill?" The steed replied, "Prince Ivan has come and carried off Marya Morevna."
No. Is it possible to catch them?
"It is possible to sow wheat, to wait till it grows up, to reap it, to thresh it, to grind it into flour, to make 5 pies of it, to eat those pies, and then start in pursuit, and even then to be in time." Well, Koshchei galloped off and caught up Prince Ivan.
"Now,"
says he, Koshchei,
"this time I will forgive you. In return for your kindness in giving me water to drink. And a second time I will forgive you for the same. But the 3rd time, beware. I will cut you to bits."
Then he took Marya Morevna from him and carried her off. But Prince Ivan sat down on a stone and burst into tears. He wept and then returned back again to Marya Morevna. Now Koshchei the Deathless happened not to be at home. "Let us fly, Marya Morevna." "Ah, Prince Ivan, he will catch us." "Suppose he does catch us. At all events, we shall have spent an hour or two together." So they got ready and fled. A Koshchei the Deathless was returning home. His good steed stumbled beneath him.
"Why stumblest thou, sorry jade? Scentest thou some ill?"
"Prince Ivan has come, carried off Marya Morevna."
"Is it possible to catch them?"
"It is possible to sow barley, to wait till it grows up, to reap it, then thresh it, to brew beer, to drink ourselves drunk on it, to sleep our fill, then to set off in pursuit, and yet to be in time." Koshchei galloped off and caught up easily with Prince Ivan.
"Didn't I tell you that you should not see Marya Morevna any more than your own ears?"
And he took her away, and he carried her off home with him. Well, Prince Ivan was left there alone. He wept, and then he went back again after Marya Morevna, and Koshchei happened to be away from home at that moment. "Let us fly, Marya Morevna." "Ah, Prince Ivan, he's sure to catch us and hew you in pieces." "Let him hew away. I cannot live without you." And so they got ready and fled. Well, Koshchei the Deathless was returning home when his good steed stumbled beneath him.
"Why stumblest thou? Scentest thou any ill?"
"Prince Ivan has come and carried off Marya Morevna." Koshchei galloped off, caught Prince Ivan, and chopped him into little pieces, savage and complete. He put them in a barrel, he smeared it with pitch, and bound it with iron hoops, and flung it into the blue sea. But Marya Morevna he carried off home. At that very time, the silver turned black, which Prince Ivan had left with his brothers-in-law. "Ah," they said, "the evil is accomplished sure enough." And then the eagle hurried to the blue sea, caught hold of the barrel, and dragged it ashore. The falcon flew away for the water of life, and the raven for the water of death. After all, they all three met, broke open the barrel, and took out the remains of Prince Ivan. They washed them and put them together in fitting order. The raven sprinkled them with the water of death. The pieces joined together. The body became whole. The falcon sprinkled it with the water of life. And Prince Ivan shuddered, stood up, and said, "What a time I've been sleeping." You've gone on sleeping a good deal longer if it hadn't been for us," replied his brothers-in-law. "Now come, pay us a visit." "Not so, brothers. I shall go look for Marya Morevna." And when he had found her, he said to her, "Find out from Koshchei the Deathless whence he got so good a steed." So Marya Morevna chose a favorable moment and began asking Koshchei about it. Koshchei replied,
"Behind thrice 9 islands, in the 30th kingdom, On the other side of the fiery river, there lives a Baba Yaga. She was so good a mare that she flies right round the world on it every day. And she has many other splendid mares. I watched her herd for 3 days without losing a single mare. And in return for that, the Baba Yaga gave me a foal.
But how did you get across the fiery river?
Why, I've a handkerchief of this kind. When I wave it thrice on my right hand, there springs up a very lofty bridge, and the fire cannot reach it.
Well, Marya Morevna listened to all of this and repeated it to Prince Ivan, and she carried off the handkerchief and gave it to him. And so he managed to get across the fiery river, and then went on to the Baba Yagas. Long went he on, without getting anything either to eat or to drink, and at last he came across an outlandish bird and its young ones. Says Prince Ivan, "Well, I'll eat one of these chickens." "Oh, don't eat, Prince Ivan," begs the outlandish bird. "Sometime or other I'll do you a good turn." And he went on farther, and he saw a hive of bees in the forest. "Oh, I'll get a bit of honeycomb," he says.
Don't disturb my honey, Prince Ivan," exclaims the queen bee. "Sometime or other I'll do you a good turn."
So he didn't disturb it, but he went on. And presently there met him a lioness with her cub. "Anyhow, I'll eat this lion cub." I don't know why that line is written that way after the other ones. "Oh, anyhow, I'll just eat a lion. I'm so hungry. I feel quite unwell."
"Please, let us alone, Prince Ivan,"
begs the lioness.
"Sometime or other, I'll do you a good turn."
"Very well. Have it your own way," says he, who probably couldn't fight a lion, to be honest. Hungry and faint, he wandered on, walked farther and farther, and at last came to where stood the house of the Baba Yaga. Round the house were set 12 poles in a circle, and on each of 11 of these poles there was stuck a human head. The 12th alone remained unoccupied. "Hail, Granny!"
"Hail, Prince Ivan! Wherefore have you come? Is it of your own accord, or on compulsion?"
"I've come to earn from you a heroic steed."
"So be it, Prince. You won't have to serve a year with me, but just 3 days. If you take good care of my mares, I'll give you a heroic steed. But if you don't, why then you mustn't be annoyed at finding your head stuck up the last pole there."
Well, Prince Ivan agreed to these terms. The Baba Yaga gave him food and drink and bid him set about his business. Don't know if I'd take that food. Personally, I know he's hungry, but does he know what a Baba Yaga is? But the moment he had driven the mares afield, They cocked up their tails, and away they tore across the meadow in all directions. Before the prince had time to look round, they were all out of sight. Thereupon he began to weep, and to disquiet himself. Then he sat down upon a stone and went to sleep. But when the sun was near its setting... By the way, I respect that. Everything's going wrong. You don't think you can do anything. Have a nap. The outlandish bird came flying up to him and awakened him, saying,
"Arise, Prince Ivan. The mares are at home now."
The prince arose and returned home, and there the Baba Yaga was storming and raging at her mares and shrieking,
"Whatever did you come home for?"
"How could we help coming home?" said they. "There came flying birds from every part of the world, and all but pecked our eyes out."
Well, well, tomorrow don't go galloping out over the meadows, but disperse amid the thick forests.
Well, Prince Ivan slept all night, and in the morning the Baba Yaga said to him,
"Mind, Prince, if you don't take care of the mares, if you lose merely one of them, your bald head will be stuck on that pole."
And he drove the mares afield. Immediately they cocked up their tails and dispersed among the thick forests. And again did the prince sit down on the stone, weep, and then go to sleep. Honestly, you could try anything. I know it's going to fail, but the character of the people in these stories, they get to be the hero because of the labor of others. The sun went down behind the forest, and up came running the lioness.
"Arise, Prince Ivan. The mares are all collected."
Well, Prince Ivan arose and went home, and more than ever did the Baba Yaga storm at her mares and shriek,
"Whatever did you come back for?"
"How could we keep help coming back? Beasts of prey came running at us from all parts of the world, and they all but tore us utterly to pieces."
"Well, tomorrow you'll run off into the blue sea."
And again did Prince Ivan sleep through the night. The next morning the Baba Yaga sent him forth to watch the mares.
"If you don't take good care of them," says she, "your bald head will be stuck on that pole."
He drove the mares afield. Immediately they cocked up their tails, disappeared from sight, and fled into the blue sea. And there they stood, up to their necks in water. Prince Ivan sat down on the stone, wept, and fell asleep. The old Prince Ivan special. As Gennaro says, I've tried nothing and I'm already out of ideas. Jumpstore says it's refreshing to see a prince with Disney princess powers. Brilliant. Yeah, that's right. Just sit down and cry. But when the sun had set behind the forest, up came a flying bee and said, "Arise, Prince. The mares are all collected. But when you get home, don't let the Baba Yaga set eyes on you, but go into the stable and hide behind the mangers. There you'll find a sorry colt rolling in the muck. Do you steal it, and at the dead of night ride away from the house." Prince Ivan arose, slipped into the stable, and lay down behind the mangers, while the Baba Yaga was storming away at her mares and shrieking,
"Why did you come back?
How could we help coming back? There came flying bees in countless number from all parts of the world and began stinging us on all sides till the blood came. Well, the Baba Yaga went to sleep, fitfully, mind you, and in the dead of night Prince Ivan stole the sorry colt, saddled it, jumped on its back, and galloped away to the fiery river. And when he came to that river, he waved the handkerchief 3 times on the right hand, and suddenly, springing goodness knows whence, there hung across the river, high in the air, a splendid bridge. The prince rode across the bridge and waved the handkerchief twice, only on the left hand, and there remained across the river a thin, ever so thin bridge. Then, when the Baba Yaga got up in the morning, the sorry colt was not to be seen, and off she set in pursuit. And at full speed did she fly in her iron mortar, urging it on with the pestle, sweeping away her traces with the broom. Probably worth mentioning, anybody who watched my other Baba Yaga ones will know this, but she rides around in a mortar and pestle instead of like on a broom. She dashed up to the fiery river and gave a glance and said, "A capital bridge," and she drove onto the bridge, but had only got halfway when the bridge broke in 2, and the Baba Yaga went flop into the river. And there truly she meet with a cruel death. Prince Ivan fattened up the colt in the green meadows, and it turned into a wondrous steed. And then he rode to where Marya Morevna was, and she came running out and flung herself on his neck, crying, "By what means has God brought you back to life?" "Thus and thus," says he, "now come along with me." Now, I understand that this is like an oral storytelling thing where it's like you don't need to hear what he specifically says because we've already experienced everything he would be saying. It would be dull to hear it again. But it is funny to me whenever I see this to imagine that that was his literal response. That she was like, how did you cut? I saw him cut you up. I wept. How are you alive? Thus and thus. Let's go. I am afraid, Prince Ivan. If Koshchei catches you, you will be cut in pieces again. No. He won't catch us. I have a splendid, heroic steed now. It flies just like a bird. And so they got on its back and rode away. Well, Koshchei the Deathless was returning home when his horse stumbled beneath him.
"Who art thou stumbling for, sorry jade? Dost thou scent any ill?"
"Prince Ivan has come and carried off Marya Morevna."
"Can we catch them?"
"God knows. Prince Ivan has a horse now which is better than I."
"Well, I can't stand it,"
says Koshchei the Deathless.
"I will pursue."
And after a time, he came up with Prince Ivan, lighted on the ground, and was going to chop him up with his sharp sword. But at that moment, Prince Ivan's horse smote Koshchei the Deathless full swing with its hoof, and cracked his skull, and the prince made an end of him with a club. And afterwards the prince heaped up a pile of wood, set fire to it, and burnt Koshchei the Deathless on the pyre, and scattered his ashes to the wind. And then Marya Morevna mounted Koshchei's horse, and Prince Ivan got on his own, and they rode away to visit first the raven, then the eagle, and then the falcon. And wherever they went, they met with a joyful greeting. "Ah, Prince Ivan, why, we never expected to see you again. Well, it wasn't for nothing that you gave yourself so much trouble. Such a beauty as Marya Morevna, one might search for all the world over and never find one like her." And so they visited, and they feasted, and afterwards they went off to their own realm. Oh, hello, Mr. Kitten Belt, coming in right here at the tail end. Jumpstore says, how did he return you from the dead? I just did. Wait, what? First of all, you can see what I mean why it had to be two different stories. Like, that was one story. We got into it pretty quick. Took the whole show to get through. And the next one is close to this long as well. Yeah, it's an interesting one, Uncle Kitty. I'm sure there's tales about. Uncle Kitty was asking how she caught Koshchei in the first place. Gia says at bedtime, I'm going to say I'm off to my own realm. Jumpstore says that climactic battle sure did feel like the storyteller decided, okay, my kids are nodding off, time to wrap this up. It is honestly a bit surprising to me how much these collected stories do not detail fights at all. But then I thought about it, and I realized that probably the collectors of this collected it from someone who like said more about the fight, and they were like, I don't need to get all these details in here, and then they're just like, he fights and moves on, because most of them are pretty utilitarian, and definitely had a hand in how the story gets rendered on the page, because I can imagine that if you were telling this story live and you knew it really well, you would probably have developed like a series of descriptions and stuff to liven up the combat. But it also is the case that combat, this was a tip that I got from my writing class days. I don't remember the exact phrasing of it, but roughly speaking, fighting is like action in a movie and in like a stage play. But in a book, fighting is generally pretty tedious. Conflict like that, fighting conflict, action is dialogue in a book. So usually it's more about banter or them stating their, like moral views to each other in incisive ways. And then just a few references to clashing blades, because to actually like meticulously describe a battle is usually pretty dull to read and way slow. Just as combat was a daily occurrence back then. Maybe. I assume they are all pretty spread out. Genera says, oh wow, didn't even feel that long. Well, that's good to hear. That means you were enjoying the story. There's a lot in that story. When I read this story, I what's the word I'm looking for here? It was so long and so varied in the amount of like cycles it had glued together that I realized I had forgotten how this story had started. And that I'd sort of felt like I'd read a couple of stories, and then I was like, no, that's the same story, if that makes sense. Anyways, Jumpstore says, boy, hearing the story would have thought the fights were epic. And the best part, and all the girls would have thought, but what about all the impossible chores the cute little animals had to help with? Yeah, maybe. It definitely has a lot of like character and variety in it, which is one thing I'll say for this. Both these tales, honestly. All right, before I sign off, because this is part 1 of 2, what can we observe about Koshchei the Deathless here? Now, I'm not like a scholar on anything, but just from reading the story, what can we ascertain? Magical and deathless, at least by natural causes. The idea being that he was chained into a cabinet and he just wasn't being fed or given water, so he weakened, but he doesn't die. Now, this story doesn't go ahead and talk about why he doesn't die, but the next story will. And I think it's probably fair to say that it was implied that he's enough of a character that people would have already known why. But the thing that stood out for me, the reason why I was like, I wonder if this is the origin of liches, is that he has lich energy, which isn't going to mean anything to anybody who hasn't like engaged with D&D, or at least some media that involved similar things. But his like the kind of menacing cruelty and his willingness to like make a deal just to get what he wants, and the sharp intelligence and the collection of magic items and mysterious magical abilities that others don't seem to have, and he feels lich like. It's not hard for me to believe that. Like, sometimes people will propose that something in D&D came from some character in folklore, and usually the argument is some kind of like surface level thing, and they'll be like, oh look, it's a one-eyed creature and this thing has one eye. It'll be things like that. But I feel like a lot of the time they don't feel like those characters do in D&D and other settings. Koshchei feels like a lich. And that's what was so fascinating to me. GS says scarier than Baba Yaga. Oh, wow. I didn't expect that. Do other people feel that way? GS says he's my scariest choice. Oh, interesting. Well, I'll be curious to see. If you can't get it in the chat this week, because I'm going to sign off now, let me know next week. Jumpstore says GS kind of like a manual that was written in, I think, the 1600s or maybe 1700s, that when talking to horses about horses said, you know what a horse is as the description of a horse? Well, thanks. That's not useful. But Jumpstore makes a point. I have my own way to this point that I'll mention in a moment, but a good point to keep in mind. Sadly, that's why a lot of information was lost to history, because people just assumed these things would always exist, and they were such common knowledge no one bothered to record or explain them. And I think my favorite example, which I've said on this channel before, is that we do right now in our lives, is when we write a recipe that requires eggs, we do not specify the source of that egg unless it's not a chicken egg. So we just assume, because of a bunch of specific factors about how we live, that any egg's going to be a chicken egg. But in the future, who knows? Maybe chickens are extinct, or maybe they're just not as common. Maybe they use mostly ducks for eggs, if at all. And they would have no idea. No way of knowing. Anyhow, Jumpstore, thank you for the birthday wishes. 5 years of the channel. Thank you to everybody who supported it. I really enjoy bringing you stories, and I hope you enjoy hearing them. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, GS. Thank you, Genera, Uncle Kitty, Jumpstore, and anybody else who might be out there lurking. Oh, Kitten Pelt as well. GS says, I'm not saying Baba Yaga is less dangerous, but the Deathless guy creeps me out more. I think she's definitively less dangerous. She mostly goes after kids. This guy seems genuinely unstoppable. All right. It's hard to top Baba Yaga if you know enough about her. Baba also changes a lot from story to story, and I don't find Koshchei the Deathless to have that much variety from what I've seen, which admittedly is limited, but we'll see. Anyhow, I'll keep the fire going and warm. You folks have yourself a good sleep.